Mesechus Yevamos Daf is devoted almost entirely to the question of can the Chachamim uproot a halacha midoraisa, a lav, an iser, a chalos, whatever it is, can it be uprooted for the purpose of being mekayim a gzeira d'Rabbanan? The Gemara has suggested that it cannot. The Gemara is going to try to bring a number of proofs where we see that Chazal did uproot a din d'Oraisa in order to be mekayim a purpose d'Rabbanan. Towards the end of the daf, the Gemara will go back to the Mishnah and discuss some of the additional lines in the Mishnah itself. So let's begin and do the first of our proofs. The proof is from the case of somebody who eats, someone who's a Yisrael, goes ahead and he eats Truma Tameya. Now generally if a Yisrael eats Truma, first of all he's over an Isser, second of all he has to replace the Kohen's possessions. He took the Truma that belonged to the Kohen, has to give it back to him. That's Truma Tehora. Here it's Truma Tameya. The Kohen couldn't have eaten it anyway, it's Truma Tameya, but the halach is he still has to replace it. He has to give him Chulin, non-Truma has to give him Chulin in place of what he took away from the Kohen. Now he ate Truma Tameya, but he has to give back Chulin Tehora. That's the halacha. What happens if he didn't give back Tahor? He gave back Tameh, didn't do what he was supposed to do. So we have a machlokes tanaim. Somchis quotes Rabbi Meir, says it depends whether he did it b'shogeg or he did it b'mezid. If he did it b'shogeg, he didn't realize that it was Tameh, so then it counts, it works. Okay, he wasn't supposed to do it that way, but it works, it's fine. The chulin that he gave belongs to the Kohen, becomes Truma, and he doesn't have to replace it. If he did it b'mezid though, so then what he gave does not count at all. It doesn't work. There's no din Truma on what he gave. He takes it back, and he has to give new ones. He has to give Tahar, because the ones he gave were Tameh b'mezid, not worth anything. Now, Chachamim disagree on both counts. The Chachamim say there's no difference between shogeg and mezid. What he gave is given, and he has to replace it again. Now, if he did it b'mezid, so they argue on Sumchis, because Sumchis has said he takes it back, at least according to our initial understanding. He takes it back, there's no chalos truma, he has to give a different one instead. Chazal say, the Chachamim say he has to, what he gave counts, and he has to give again. That's number one. Secondly, they say that we say the same halacha for shogeg, even though shogeg is not his fault. Just like we knas him by a mezid, we do a gzeira shogeg adu mezid, and also the same halacha applies. He takes it, he doesn't get it back. It belongs to the Kohen, and he has to replace it again. So before the Gemara goes into the proof, the Gemara says there's a couple of things we have to clear up over here. First of all, what's the problem? The guy gave him chulin tameim. That's a perfectly good thing to give. That means that the Kohen will have what to eat when he's tamei. When the Kohen's tamei, he can't eat truma. So he took away the guy's truma. He took away the Kohen's truma, which he couldn't eat when he was tamei. He took away the Kohen's truma tamei, which he couldn't even eat at all. And he gave him back something that's perfectly functional. He gave him back chulin tamei. What's the problem? Now Rashi points out that the chulin becomes truma and it's tamei, so the Kohen won't be able to eat it anyway. But from the guy's perspective, he didn't do something wrong. He gave him back something that's perfectly functional. So why do we have a taina against him? That's what the Gemara wants to know. So the Gemara therefore says we have to change the case in the Mishnah. We're not talking about where he ate Truma Tameya, we're talking about where he ate Truma Tahora. Had he eaten Truma Tameya, he can give back whatever he wants. And he ate something that the guy can't use. Anything he gives him is fine. If he ate Truma Tahora, that's where we have this Machlokes, Sumchis, and the Chachamim. So now the Gemara says let's go into it. Let's go. According to Sumchis, what's the halacha, did we say, when he gave the truma b'mezid? We said that it goes back to him and he has to replace it. How does it go back to him? Midaraisa, it counts. He gave it, he replaced it, he gave him tashlumin, he gave him chulin to take the place of what he ate, and that's chal shem truma on it. This is truma stuff. How could Sumchas, quoting Rabbi Meir, say it goes back to him and it's not truma? Daraisa, it is truma. So you see that what's happening here is that midirabanan, we took the shem truma off it. We wanted to knas the guy that has to do it again, so we took the shem truma off it. As a matter of fact, the Kohen, if he theoretically would use that truma and go be mekadosh a woman, she'd be married. And the Rabbanan came and said she's not married. The Rabbanan said it doesn't belong to the Kohen. It goes back to the guy who gave it. So you taking a woman who's an Eishes Ish Deraisa and you're freeing her. You're saying she's not married. How could that be? So the Gemara therefore says what Rabbi Meir meant when he said that if it was given b'mezid, that it doesn't count as truma, is just that it has to be replaced. They were not saying that he gets it back. That what he gave counts as truma and it belongs to the Kohen and he keeps it. And therefore we're not uprooting anything from anybody. We're just saying he has to replace it. It gave b'mezid, he has to replace it. So Gemara says, if so, that's the same as the Chachamim. The Chachamim also said what he gave counts, and it stays shem truma, and he has to replace it. So Gemara says, yes, correct. There is no machlokes between the Chachamim and Sumchas Rabbi Meir in the case of B'mezid. The only machlokas is on shogeg. The Chachamim say we say the same halacha by shogeg as a gzeira. And Rabbi Meir says, no, there we don't knas him. In that case, there is no issue. Okay, now the Gemara goes to its next proof. That's halacha if somebody brings a carbon, and the blood of the carbon becomes tameh. So you're not supposed to continue bringing the carbon. You can't do zrika, you can't do the halachas that follow afterwards. So this person went ahead and he did zrika. He did zrika b'shogeg. So, zrika b'shogeg, even though it was tameh, so the Mishnah paskins, it works. It's hortza. It counts. And then you can go ahead and continue doing the other avodas that follow afterwards. Now, b'mezid, the Mishnah says it doesn't count. Of course, if it's tameh, blood, you're not allowed to do zrika. You went ahead and you did it. B'mezid, it would not count. So now, the Gemara's kasha is, why is it no good? Midoraisa, the halacha is that you're allowed to do zrika on tameh blood. And then it's chal, like it says in a brisa, that if the kohen hagadol is wearing the tzitz, so it's meratzeh on the blood and on the meat and on the chalev, whether it's tameh, b'shogeg, b'mezid, purpose, ones, ratzon, single, tzibor, whatever it is, the tzitz is meratzeh on all tameh blood, and it's chal, and it works. So midoraisa, this blood that was brought is chal, and it's good. You continue the rest of the carbon. But here, if the guy did it b'mezid, we say that it's no good. Now the problem then becomes is that you make him bring another carbon again, and the second carbon, he's not chayvin. It's chulin. It's chulin lazara. Someone bringing a carbon that he thinks he's chayvin, because midarabanan we said he's chayv, but midaraisa, the first carbon counted, and he's not chayvin the second one. So how could we be allowed to do that? Obviously we show you can uproot the din daraisa that it's chulin lazara. So my answer is where it says no. Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina says lo horta doesn't mean that he brings another carbon. The person, the one who was chayiv the carbon counts for him, even if it was brought even if it was tameh and zrika was done b'mezid, counts for him. When we said that it's not hurtza, we meant that it cannot be eaten. The meat of this carbon cannot be eaten, and that's all. We're stopping him from eating the meat, but we're not saying that he brings another carbon. So the Gemara says he's stopping from eating the meat. That's also being oiker something midaraisa. Midaraisa, the halacha is that meat of a carbon has to be eaten. It's a mitzvah saseh, and you're saying it cannot be eaten. So you see the Chazal are still abruning halacha. The Gemara says that's different. Even though it says va'achlu osam asher kupar bahem, that there's a mitzvah for the kohanim to eat the meat, and that makes the owners be miskaper in it. But this is called a shev va'al taseh. You're not actually being nevatel. You're not going ahead and violating a mitzvah actively. You're just not doing the mitzvah, and the mitzvah kind of expires on its own. So shev va'al taseh, you're not doing it. You're just letting it lapse. That Chazal were willing to be okay. They were willing to undo and block you from doing that mitzvah, and that wouldn't be a kasha. That I don't have an issue with. So the Gemara now continues. The Gemara says, now that you've answered that a sheva al tasa, being mevatel mitzvah saseh, is that you're agreeing that Chazal are allowed to do, that answers a number of kashas that I was planning on bringing you, which are all sheva al tasa. And the Gemara lists them off. Orel, hazah, izmol, sadin, tzitzis, kivsei atzeres, shofar, and lulav. All those were things that I was planning on asking, the Gemara says, and they were all mitzvah saseh, and sheva al tasa answers all of them. What are these things? So Rashi explains, Orel is the halacha that a ger who's megayer and has a mila is metame him. If he becomes tameh from his own mila, and therefore he can't bring a carbon pesach, that's gzeira derabanan, because we don't want him to get confused next year, and think that he was allowed to bring a carbon and eat from it, even if he had an arla. So that's a gzeira derabanan. Daraisa, though, he is allowed to eat the carbon pesach, so the rabbanan came and took the mitzvah of carbon pesach away from him. Similar halacha is that of hazah. Hazah is not supposed to be done on Shabbos midirabbanon. It's a shos, it's a rabbanon to do sprinkling of the paraduma water on Shabbos. By not allowing somebody to sprinkle paraduma water in the time which deraisa he could, they are taking the mitzvah of carbon pesach away from him if he can't be metaher on time to eat it. Izmol is the halacha that you're not allowed to bring a mila knife through certain reshuyos derabanon. You'll stop from a mila being performed on Shabbos because they can't bring the knife in a situation that's carrying midrabanan, and we were mevatel the mitzvah say of doing mila in the right time. Sadin on tzitzis is a halacha that on a sheet that has shotness, you're allowed to put the tzitzis and there's no isser there. The Rabbanon asered that. The Rabbanon said don't put tzitzis and allow a shotness sheet because people may do it on a blanket, and a blanket is not chayiv in its tzitzis, and therefore shotness is aser. So you're not allowed to put tzitzis on a shotness sheet, which could potentially be confused as one that you use at night. And again, we took the mitzvah of tzitzis away from this sheet, which is chayiv in tzitzis. Now, kivsei atzeres, Rashi says he doesn't have a Messiah as to what that's referring to. Rashi says he heard a pshat, which he likes and he approves of. There are two lambs that are meant to be brought as kabbanas on Shavuos, kivsei atzeres. The halacha there is that if the Kohen did the shchita shalei l'shma, it's still kosher. You can still continue the carbon and do the other avodos, and it's chal. Chazal said you can't do it if it was done shalei l'shma. Then if it's Shabbos, you can't continue. They made a gzeira that the Zrika is a chil Shabbos midrabanan, even the Beis Hamikdash, if it's done shalol shma, you can't continue. The Marvata, the rest of the halachas of these karbanos, the Zrika, the Haktaras Emurim, and the eating of the meat, they were Marvata all those, even though it's only an Isser Derabanan. So you see it again. And the last two, shofar on lulav, that's what Chazal said not to blow shofar when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos, and not to take the lulav when the first day of Sukkot falls on Shabbos. That's also mitzvahs deraisa that Chazal were mevatel. But all of these are not a kasha anymore now that we've said Sheva al Taseh, Chazal are allowed to stop and cancel. All right, now the Gemara goes on to its next proof, and that's a pasuk where it says, Elif Tishman, you should listen to a Navi once a Navi is established as a Navi Emes, a true Navi, even if he tells you to be mevatel mitzvah deraisa, to be over one of the mitzvahs in the Torah, you're allowed to listen to him. The Brisa says an example of that is Eliyahu and Har Carmel. It's part of his event where he showed the wrongness of the Nevi'ei Habal. He brought karbanas. He brought a carbon outside the Beis Hamikdash. That was chulin. That was kachim b'chutz. It was a time when the bamos, private mizbechos, were aser, and he did it anyway, and that's a violation of an iser deraisa. But you see, you're allowed to in a case like that. So the Gemara says this is not a kasha. Here, this is talking about a different thing. The Torah specifically says you're allowed to listen to a navi. In that case, it's not called that the rabbanan are mi'oker halacha. It's a special halacha of elif tishman. Once a navi is established, you can listen to him. So the Gemara says, so let's learn from here that just like you can listen to a Navi in a case like this, you could listen to Chazal in other cases. Just like Eliyahu, you should listen to everybody in other Derabbanans have a right to be Iker. Gemara says, no, it's not a kasha. You cannot learn, this is Migdar Milsa. This was in order to prevent a problem in Klal Yisrael. That's a special event. There is rights to cancel it there. You can't necessarily say the same thing is true for other Gezeros Derabbanan, which are not so vital, a vital moment in history. All right, now the Gemara brings this next proof, and that's from the halacha of a husband who sends a get to his wife. He sends it with a messenger, a shliach, and then he cancels the get. So the halacha is, what he really should do is he should go send the shliach to go run, catch up to the other shliach, and tell him, hey, I'm canceling the get. Or you could at least send a message to the wife and say that I'm canceling the get. As a matter of fact, that's what he has to do. Doraisa, though, he could just go to a bezdin in his town, say that get I sent is batal, and the get's canceled. And the woman can never find out about it. And that obviously is a major problem because she thinks she's divorced when she gets the get. She doesn't know that he canceled it privately back in his hometown. She'll go get remarried, she'll be an Ashes Ish, doing an Isser, and her kids will be Mamzer. So we can't have that happen. Therefore, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was mataking that he can't do that. He has to go inform her, catch the shliach, or send a message to her. So the Gemara, what happens if he didn't? What happens if he was mevatel in his town in front of a beis din privately? The Raisa, it works. So what happens there? So a Raisa that says that this is a machlokes between Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Rebbe. Rebbe says it counts. The Raisa, the get is batal. The get is completely batal. Shimon Gamliel says it doesn't count. If you would allow him to do that, so then makayach bezdin yafa. We, the bezdin, made a takana not to do that. He goes and he does it anyway, and it works. So what we did is a waste of time. So in order to make sure that the bezdin still has power, you got to say that if he does a private thing against what we told him to do, it's not going to count. So Gemara says, I don't understand. This woman received a get that's a batal get. I mean, she's still married. and because we want to say that he's not allowed to be mevatel the get that way, we're saying that she's free. How can you do that? The get she got is batal. How can we say that it works midiraisa, it's batal, and she's married, and we're saying she's free? Lama. Obviously, we're uprooting a halacha. Gemara says, no, this is different. That's because a kiddushin is a special thing called adaita de rabbanan mekadesh and afkina rabbanan lekiddushin minei. Now, these are two concepts which really meld together, and that's that the rabbanan have the right to undo anybody's kiddushin. When somebody marries, the rabbanan could say this kiddushin is canceled. So in a case like this, where this person went ahead and he was about to get, the rabbanan cancel their kiddushin. How do they do that? So the Gemara initially assumes that they do it through the method called hefker beis hefker, which is the whatever valuables, the ring, the money, whatever he gave her to be a mekadesh, or Chazal retroactively uproot his ownership of that item, like we've seen on the Daf yesterday. Chazal can take away money from anybody; it's one of the powers of the court, and therefore he didn't own it. If he didn't own it, the kedushin wasn't chal. So Mar says that's very good if he was mekadesh by giving her a ring or something valuable. What if he was mekadesh b'biyah? There's three ways to do kiddushin: kesef, shtar, and biyah. He could have just done a biyah and mekadesh her that way. So there's nothing for you to take away ownership from him. So Mar says no, but there's still a rule adaita de rabbanan. Whenever anybody says kiddushin, he says al das Moshe v'Yisrael. It's only if the rabbanan, only if the Beis Din agrees to the marriage that it's chal, and Beis Din will say retroactively we don't agree. The biyah that he did is nothing but znus. It's not a kiddushin, and therefore they're not married. And that's how they were able to say that the get that he gave is canceled, even though the rest is not canceled because they uprooted his kiddush in the first place. But they're not actually violating any halacha. There is a halachic method by which they accomplish the goal that they want without violating any halachas. Midaraisa. Another Gemara brings its next proof, and that's Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says in a Raisa, Beis Din are allowed to give makis and punishments on something that's not a deraisa. Not that they can go against the deraisa, but in order to protect mitzvahs, they're allowed to make zeros, halachos midrabanan, and they can punish people. They can give people malchus and all kinds of onshin, serious onshin, even misa, based on their derabanan halachas. And there's two incidents the Brisa brings. It was a story of somebody who rode a horse on Shabbos in the days of the Greeks, and they brought it to Beis Din and they stoned him. Now, riding horses in Isser Shabbos, derabanan. There's no misa for violating Shabbos derabanan, but they gave misa to him in this case anyway. That's because it was a tremendous lax. People were becoming Greeks, and it was a time when they had to shore things up, and they gave him skila in order to strengthen Shabbos observance. Another incident that happened was there was a time of pritzas. People were doing all kinds of averos, and there was somebody who was Loel, his own wife, under a fig tree, the Gemara says. The understanding being that he did a mitzvah pritzas, but it wasn't iser because it was his wife, but the act that he did was a pritzas, and therefore they gave him malchus for that. And he didn't actually do anything wrong, it was just a pritzas, but in order to prevent the appearance of an avera, because this was a time when there was a lot of people that were doing things like that, they went ahead and they gave him an onish for that. So how, again, could they be allowed to do that? How could they give a person skila? How could they give him malchus for halacha that's only derabanan? That's not within derabanan's powers. So Gemara says not a kasha. This is a migdar milsa. This is a unique moment in history where they had to prevent a downward slide in Klal Yisrael. Like we said before with Eliyahu and Har Carmel, they're allowed to do that. Okay, this concludes the Gemara's discussion about powers of the Rabbanon against the Deraisa. Now the Gemara goes back to the Mishnah, and we had listed off in the Mishnah a number of halachos that if this woman whose husband traveled away and she received a false report that he was dead, she went and she remarried, and then her original husband came back, now she's married to a second man and her first husband shows up. So we went through the halachos that we're continuing to go through the halachos that the Mishnah said. So the next halacha that it said is that both husbands are not allowed to be metame to take care of her when she dies if they are kohanim. So where do you see that from? The Gemara says because the pasuk that says that a man is allowed to become tamei, a kohen is allowed to become tamei to take care of his wife after she dies, is kiyum l'she'erei akarev elav. He's allowed to be metame to she'erei. She'erei is a reference to one's wife. It also says, however, lo yitame bal ba'ama, a husband cannot become tamei. Baal here is used, not the simple meaning, but it's used to mean a husband. So which is it? Can a husband be metame or not be metame? So what we see from there is that sometimes a husband can be metame, sometimes he can't. When he can be metame for his wife if she's kosher to him, it cannot be metame to his wife if she's pasul to him. This woman is asur l'bal, asur l'bal. She's asur to both men going forward, and therefore she's considered to be a pasul. Neither can be metame for her. Okay, next halacha in the Mishnah is that neither one has rights to the objects that she finds. The halacha is that generally a husband that takes possession of things that his wife finds, So the Gemara explains, generally that halacha exists in order to prevent discord between them. Here we want them to have discord because we want them to separate their asa to each other. Next halacha in the Mishnah is that he doesn't get her ma'aseh yadeh, he doesn't get her income. So the Gemara says the reason generally that a husband has rights to his wife's income is because he is supporting her. He gives her everything she needs. His responsibility to support her financially. In exchange for that, anything that she makes goes into the family pot. But here, he doesn't give her any mizonos. That's the halach we saw earlier in the Mishnah. He doesn't financially support her anymore, and therefore she obviously keeps her own earnings. Last halach which we're going to discuss today is that of hafaras nedarim. Generally, a husband has the right to be made for his wife's nedarim. These two men do not. The Gemara explains the reason generally is because otherwise it'll make her disgusting in his eyes if she swears to something that includes nivel, like she's not going to she'll be ma'ana herself, and she'll become unpleasant. And those are the things that the husband cancels. Here, though, we would prefer that they be unpleasant to each other. We want them to separate their asa to each other anyway. That's why we take the power of hafaras nedarim away.